welcome to this episode of The Dealer Playbook, a podcast that explores what it takes to create a thriving career right here in the retail auto industry. I'm your host, Michael Cirillo, so delighted to be joined by the VP of Communications at TrueCar, Kerri Wise. We're talking about an important topic, talking about diversity. I am so excited about this conversation, and I know we just did a separate podcast hitting record. But I mean, like, this is a conversation that, A, the timing of it is long overdue. Yeah. B, it fits in with the DPB gang. These are people that are looking to get rid of the negative stigmas associated with the car business. And I'm so delighted to be joined by individuals such as yourself who are breaking the mold of what the car industry has traditionally looked like and saying, hey, yeah, there's all these things about the car business, but there's all these things about life, and that's going to actually make you better at the car business. Or maybe you don't want to be in the car business anymore. You want to be a dog groomer. What we talk about here is going to make you better at whatever it is that you want to do. Everybody on the show that follows the show knows that I believe so deeply in building relationships of trust, and that is the foundation of living a happy and fulfilled life. And I think the conversation about diversity is one that, A, I am admittedly a little afraid of having, but also excited to have, because I think, hey, if we're not going to talk about it, who is? So I want to turn this over to you. Black woman, leader, the Women of Color Automotive Network, yes. Founder, co-founder. I mean, this is obviously something that's incredibly important to you. You were saying pre-show that during the pandemic, you started a nonprofit. Right. Craziness. Leadership, entrepreneurship is all in your blood.
I never had time before until there was a pandemic.
And by the way, on that note, I was so bummed we did not do Halloween this year because I had the perfect costume.
What were you going to be?
I was going to make this cardboard cutout look like a computer monitor. And I was going to be wearing a suit jacket, white shirt, tie, but then I was going to be wearing like cargo shorts and flip-flops on the bottom, right?
That would have been great.
Because that's what the pandemic's done, right? Like,
that's exactly it.
So it's given us time. But, we were also talking about pre-show, how it gives you time to focus on what matters most. And I mean, what a crazy year. Time to me is whatever. What is time? Time doesn't know what time it is. Mm-hmm. So I'm not mad at the year. I'm not angry with the poor 2020. I'm not mad about it. But it's weird that in such a confined period of time, pandemic, Black Lives Matter movements, protesting, elections, civil unrest, all of these things. What better time than to talk about diversity and the importance of diversity in the workplace? So I want to turn this over to you. What do we need to be talking about? What are the conversations that should be starting? And how do we approach those conversations? Because admittedly, Black woman, white man, sometimes I think people are just too afraid to have these conversations. So what are you seeing from your vantage point?
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about 2020 and all that's happened, from a racial inequality standpoint and civil unrest. And, I think about my career in automotive and how have I been successful in navigating this industry, which isn't overly diverse. When I speak at a conference, when I spoke at an NADA, I may have been the only Black person that I remember. I don't think Corey Mosley was speaking that year, or Glenn Lundy. Right. So I think I might have been the only one, or Shaka. And I definitely was the only Black woman, at least in that year. So I've always been kind of used to standing out and being different. And I've always been comfortable in some ways with that. I grew up in a very diverse area, the San Francisco Bay Area.
Okay.
And in some ways, my knack has been, bonding with white men, right? Sure. Like on a very personal level. And I think as the head of communications, as a person that's represented a company as the industry relations person for many years, part of my job is to really stay under the radar in some ways, right? To not ruffle feathers, to not cause dealers to not like my company or me. And so I haven't really tackled race per se. I've been very comfortable talking about gender, because I think everyone's kind of okay talking about gender, but for some reason, when we talk about race, it causes everybody to get uncomfortable.
Right.
But when George Floyd happened, I'm seeing companies posting things about it. I'm seeing my friends who never talked about race or who never were concerned in the past at other incidences that really bothered me, 5 years ago, 3 years ago.
Sure.
All of a sudden, this one incident caused them to talk about race. And in some ways, it opened the door wide open for me, because I just felt like I've been thinking these kind of things for so many years, 22 years in the business, and I've held it to make everybody feel more comfortable. I've held on to these things to make all of you feel more comfortable with me and with, and not feel guilty. And at the end of the day, I'm not speaking my truth. Right. I'm not sharing my experiences or my concerns for my husband and my brothers and my father. I'm not sharing that. And at the end of the day, we're not a better industry if we're not talking about diversity. And so I think this is the first step. The first step is to have these kind of conversations. And I've built close enough relationships where I'm honored that some of my white friends have come to me. Yeah. They've come to me vulnerable, like you're saying. They've come to me like, I don't know what to say. And while you can't go up to any Black person on the street, just ask that stupid question, I feel like I'm in a position in our industry where I am going to be able to bridge that gap.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, I think, and I love what you're saying. You don't, if we relied only on what the TV said to us, we would be like, we're so trapped as a society, as a culture. We're so trapped by the narrative that gets pushed to us. Mm-hmm. And I love what you just said. Like, hey, but you got to understand, I've been holding a lot in for the sake of navigating this, because of my responsibilities at work. But, but also, hey, it's time to talk about it. And I love what you just said, because it really brings in the human element. Yeah, you don't want to approach every Black man on the street. Just like I don't want to approach every white man on the street. I reserve the right, by the way, and this does not make me racist. Can we all get on the same page? I reserve the right, if I am walking down a dark street with my children in hand and I see some sketchy dude or individual, that I'm going to cross the street.
Yes.
That's my right. I can cross the street. I just got to do it. That doesn't mean, I don't know. But do you find that the race conversation just so quickly takes a left turn, and then we're not even able to actually talk about, well, what is racism? What is prejudice? What is diversity? Because I think people go, here's a perfect example. This is where we've arrived in from what I'm seeing. I grew up in British Columbia, Canada, rural British Columbia, Canada, small town, 50,000 people. There might be 7, Black people in that entire community. So when my child starts to gain their faculties and they see one of the only Black people that live in the community, what do? They do what a child does. They stare.
Right.
Because they're trying to, and they go point. Well, what do I do as a father? Because I know what somebody with the cell phone is going to do. Racist kid points and stares at Black person, when really their poor little innocent brain is just going, wait.
Kids are the most honest. Kids are the most honest, because kids, in that example that you brought up, that kid sees color. They see a difference. Right. And they're acknowledging it. And I think as adults, and I would say particularly my white friends, and I'm generalizing right now, but I grew up with a lot of white people, so I think I can speak.
Right.
That typically are raised to not see color, to not acknowledge it, to not talk about it, because by talking about it in some ways, it shows that maybe you care about it, right? Like it's like a negative thing to talk about race. And ironically, when you're a person of color, you actually talk about race all the time in your house. Like it's like not, it's kind of like a given thing. And because partially when you're one of the 7 Black people in that town, you know it. When you're in the majority, your race isn't really as much as a part of your thinking and being.
Yeah.
And so I actually love kids in that way because they see color, and it's okay. I think the message is it's okay to see color. I think we should celebrate our differences, whether it be gender or color, or whatever it might be. The hard part is when we sweep it under the rug, act like it doesn't exist. And I will tell you, even from raising children's standpoint, we do need to make sure we have conversations with our kids about different people, right? And for me, for example, raising 2 black girls, I had to be very deliberate about showing them certain professions that Black people maybe typically don't, work in. And I did that deliberately so that I can break their mindsets that are going to be shoved down their throats that you can't be certain things. Right. We are celebrated for our athletic ability. We're celebrated for our dancing. We're celebrated for our music. You are. Right. Like, and some of those stereotypes are true. Yeah. But the hard part is when you want to be a scientist. I remember in middle school being advanced in math. I had to be bused to a high school to take one math class, basically a day. And I was on a bus. I was the only Black child. I'll just be honest. A lot of the kids on the bus, they were Asian that were in this advanced math. I was embarrassed. Yeah. I was embarrassed to be in the advanced math class because I got no kudos from my Black friends. And so our own culture will drive certain things that this is what you're supposed to be, but it's also other cultures as well. And so you have to be very deliberate with children. And I'm showing them a gymnast because prior to Simone Biles, and then we didn't do gymnastics, right? Or I'm showing them certain professions. Look at this astronaut. And I'm not talking about race, but I want them exposed to it because otherwise they might just in their heads make the jump that this is not possible.
100%. I love that. And and the thing is too, when I think about what you're saying, I've experienced it firsthand in my early 20s. I left my friends, I left the prospect of going to school, and I went and did missionary work in the Philippines. I know what it's like to be the odd man out.
The only one.
Yeah. And by the way, I was like 150 pounds. I was a, championship high school wrestler. I was cut. No, to Filipinos, they go, "You are a tall, fat giant," like that, and your nose is super massive. Like their culture is so observational. They would say, "Oh, you have chicken feathers on your arms." None of it was an insult, but it goes back to what you just said, the power word, culture.
Yes.
And understanding, if I make an observation about culture that is not intended to be hurtful, that is just a straight up observation. Here's a perfect one. This is going to make so many people cringe because they go, "Well, all Black people like fried chicken."
Right.
Dude, all Italians love pasta, or pasta, as we say in the States. I'm Italian Portuguese, dude. We eat our fair share of pasta. What are you saying? What does it matter? Now, if
but see, let me just correct something here.
Yeah.
And for the record, I do love fried chicken.
I mean, come on. These bingo arms did not grow themselves, Kerri.
So I really like fried chicken.
Yes.
My parents are from the South, so that's what we do. But what I would say, though, is there are friends that I can have that conversation with. Yeah. And even me and you, we haven't really interacted a lot in real life, but I have a level of trust for you. Like, I feel like, we're good. Yeah. And I think, it's almost like the pass. You give the pass to people to have open conversations that you have built some level of trust with, that you have some relation with. Right. And you even let those people sometimes get away with stuff that you wouldn't normally let a stranger on the street get away with.
Now, is that a
I,
defense mechanism, do you think, because of that lack of trust, or just because you don't know,
I think
we don't know up front,
who,
like where their intentions are?
Yeah, I think that's what it comes down to. And that's just human nature. I think if someone on the street or someone on social says something to you, or you see them post something like, all Black people love chicken, and they're making a joke about it or whatever, it's not as funny, particularly if you don't know that person, you don't trust that person, you don't know their intentions. And I think that is where the, communication breaks down. People start getting sensitive. I think the other part too, and I will tell you, when someone doesn't like me, it's not very often, but I do have some haters, but for the most, I have haters, but it's not a lot. I'm not going to pretend like all the people out there that think they have haters everywhere. I don't have a lot.
Right.
But when someone doesn't like me, you have to remember that my list of why they don't like me might be different than your list. Your list is like, well, they just don't get me, or maybe I was in a bad mood that day, or maybe I deserved not to be liked.
Sure.
My list is that, but my list is also, is it because I'm a woman that they were ignoring me in that meeting, talking over me? Or is it because I'm Black? And even on the Black, it's, there's two categories. Is it they're a pure racist, or is it they haven't been exposed to a Black woman, right? In their life. I'm the first one. They don't know what to do with me. So I think it's like, and it could have been none of those, but those are the kind of things you're going through in your head. And you're trying to put the patterns together.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're going to be wrong. You're going to jump to a conclusion that's not right. But I want people to have some level of empathy that your list is not as long as mine on why they don't like you, or why they're ignoring you or treating you a certain kind of way.
100%. Yeah, that makes total sense to me.
Yeah.
It makes me think of, so last week I hosted an event for Kijiji Autos, which is still a branch of eBay Motors, but soon they've been acquired, and but we did their virtual event, and the closing keynote speaker was a Black woman from Atlanta. She's a diversity consultant, gave a really compelling presentation, and then we had to do the Q&A. Part of her presentation was about, we need to be honest with ourselves and give up our own BS. And she said in her presentation, hey, I'm about to get vulnerable. I'm going to share some of my BS with you. You don't have to like it. You don't have to accept it. You don't have to believe it. You don't have to whatever, but it is my BS. And she said, I admit that I still get uncomfortable around white people. And in the Q&A, I said, well, then let me very vulnerably and confidently share some of my BS. Sometimes as a white man, I get uncomfortable around Black people because I don't know if their preconceived notion of me is like that broad label of, right? Because I am the last guy on this planet that sees color. I don't see color.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, who am I to judge my brother and sister? We all put our socks on one at a time, just like the Queen of England does, and none of us are better or great. We're all children of God. I believe that. And that perhaps is the root of where I approach that from. Grew up in a household with 4 sisters. I don't see, I see, are you capable? Do you have the aptitude? Do you have the skill set that we're looking for? Then you are. There's no pay gap in my organization. All of these things I'm kind of oblivious to, but the one thing, my BS was, admittedly, I don't know if I'm being prejudged because they don't. Back to what you're saying about, like, we don't know each other that well. So am I just getting thrown into the white dude bucket of all the other white dudes? And that, of course, many of them are, sleazeballs and whatever it is.
Which isn't fair, right? To just bucket you.
But also not fair either way. Right. Like, I was so sensitive to the fact that, hey, but that's her reality. That's what's going on in her world. And I think everybody that was listening, there was this aha moment, like, look, just because that's what you see or you deal with or you believe or you feel, that doesn't mean I have to buy into any of it. but it does mean that I have to agree. I should agree that that's how you feel. Like we need to find that agreeability. Hey, that's how Kerri feels. That's how Michael feels. Now that we know that, instead of what we do today is, no, we have to be polar opposites and we have to go dive into our own echo chamber. Instead of doing that, why don't we just meet together and say, I agree that that's how you feel.
Yeah, and I think I take a very practical view on this, in that I really, even when I have been wronged by somebody, I really try to understand where they're coming from.
Sure.
I would say that, most of the white friends that I have, no one wants to be labeled as a racist. And then what happens is people start to like overcompensate and be like, no, my best friend's Black, and no, I'm totally woke. And like they overcompensate. Because the reality is we all have some level of bias, right? Like, and we're on different ends of the spectrum, but we all have some level of bias. We all take some leaps with individuals, right? When we first meet them, like I always say, my bias is introverts. If you're an introvert out there, I have a bias against you initially. I don't understand introverts as well. I think they can be standoffish. I put all these labels without even knowing, because I'm an extrovert. I expect you to hug me prior to COVID. Like that is how I interact. So if you're an introvert, sometimes you're to yourself, and I will judge you.
Right.
And so that's not a good example, but it's like people take leaps, especially if they don't understand somebody, and so I think as a Black woman, it's kind of interesting because we have certain labels like angry Black woman. Okay, God forbid I'm just having a bad day, right? Like or God forbid that I'm exerting myself in a meeting and being a leader and a strong leader, that label I have to think about.
Yeah.
So I either have to not care, or I have to be thoughtful in kind of overcompensating so that I don't come off like an angry Black woman. And those are the kind of things to me that are taxing.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, no one intends to. This isn't just like racist people. But I think when you are in the majority, you don't always realize that people that are not in the majority, how much altering that we have to do in some ways to kind of fit into the norm.
Yeah. So,
right.
I think, man, I love this conversation.
Yes.
And I'm incredibly grateful that you and I can approach this and be the ones to approach it in this way. I sense your passion, and I sense, your belief, but I'm also feeling this insane amount of love like built into this. Like I'm talking about this because I love who I am first and foremost, and I love my community, but I love this industry, and I love people. Yeah. And we're meeting at the common ground of, hey, we're people, and all of us have bad days. So the question is, from your vantage point, what can we do? And I'll be the first to admit, I got no idea, because again, like I said, seems so foreign to me that anybody would be treated different from like it. So I'm at a loss for even it. Speaking specifically of the workforce or the workplace, how do we approach, or what can we do to approach the topic of diversity? You can see my eyes moving. I'm trying to, for those that aren't watching, who are just listening, I'm searching for how to phrase what I'm trying to get to here. What do we do to approach this to start eliminating it?
Well, I think the best place to start is with relationships. And that's not always easy to do. I mean, you may work in a company where you don't have those relationships, but I will just tell you, building authentic relationships makes it much easier to have these conversations. Yeah. And I think what happens is we try to have these conversations, like I said, with the stranger on the street, someone we don't know, somebody on social, and it kind of blows up in our face. And then what do we say? Oh, we're never going to do that again. Yeah. Oh, I brought it up and that person went off on me, and you had no right to bring it up.
Yeah. One and done.
Yeah, you had no relationship with that person. And so I think relationship matters, because I think once you build some type of relationship, you're going to lunch together, you talk here and there, you're texting here and there. I think you can have those open conversations. I've had debates with some of the people I love the most in some ways, even in our industry, right? That we don't get each other, but at least we have the relationship of trust. So I think that is part of it. I think from a company standpoint, I think you have to dissect, what are you putting out there to the world? I look at car dealers, right? And I'll talk to GMs. They'll say, we really try to recruit. We really want women. We want minorities. They just don't apply. We don't understand it. And I truly believe they believe, right? Like, it's like the speaker you talked about, like, they believe what they're saying. But I also want to, if you really dissect, okay, let me go on your website as an example. Okay, I'm going to go on your website and I see all these different images, stock images or images of customers, and all I see is white people. Okay, you're sending me a message. Whether you intended to or not, you are sending me a message about either the employees at your dealership or your customer base. And those are the kind of, I guess, minor offenses that kind of, together collectively can hurt, your ability to attract diversity. Okay, now I roll up to your dealership or your company. I look at your leadership, or I look at the sales guys on the point, and all I see are the same people. Once again, another symbol of what's happening here. And symbolism matters so much. I always say, like, you might not fix all of your diversity problems, but start small. Start making that website more diverse in terms of pictures and images. Now, you got to back it up. You can't be unauthentic in terms of, we're really woke and all of that, but you got to start somewhere. I can't tell you how many employees, even at TrueCar, who, Black employees who applied to TrueCar, they'll get the job, they'll come in my office, close the door, whisper as if the company is recording them, and they'll say, I saw you on that video. I saw you on a video for the company. Wow. And I just assumed if they put a Black woman out there to represent the company, they have to be pretty open to diversity. Wow. Now that may be totally not true, but in the symbolism showed them something, right? Sure. And then once we talk about symbolism, now it's like, what is your culture like? I mean, if I got a job there, am I going to feel like you're just putting up with me, which I've felt like before, right? Like, or are you really looking for diversity, not just gender and color, but also diversity of mindsets? Because at the end of the day, I would say that's probably one of the biggest advantages to diversity is mindsets and viewpoints. Amazing. And you're a creative person, right? And thank you. I can tell by your amazing background there. But when you've been in one of those brainstorms, the best ideas come out of different mindsets and points of views. And I would say diversity to me is not a kumbaya exercise. Let's just make sure we have, one Hispanic, one Black, one Asian, one white. It's really about mindsets. And so that's why I think I have so much passion in the car business in terms of diversity, because to me, you got half of the customers coming in, they're women. 30% of car buyers are multicultural or minorities. And to still be in this day and age where 20% of the staff, I think, are women. Most of them are not on the sales floor, right? They're in administrative staffs or the BDC. So to me, it's such a lost opportunity just from a business standpoint alone. Yeah. Right. And I love what you're saying too about the mindset piece. I hope, gang, if you don't remember anything else from this, remember what Kerri just said here about mindset, that having a diverse mindset. Because, for me, like I said, I grew up in rural British Columbia. Yeah. I hope people, and you brought up overcompensating, man, I can just see there's dealers out there. They're like, hire the first brown person you see, hire the first Black person.
No, come on, man. Like you
No.
got to be smart, but
Have a strategy in place here.
have a strategy in place. You're not just hiring people now for the sake of hiring people.
No.
Because I think we do that now. We overcompensate so
That's
dramatically. Like, oh, well, I just listened to this podcast and they encourage, we have 80 white employees. And, you know, and then they go out and they just hire somebody for the sake, they hire a body for the sake of having a body.
And then the person doesn't work out. And then guess what's going to happen?
Yeah. And then they get canned.
Yeah. And then what's going to happen is I tried to hire a woman. She didn't work out. Women just don't work. Like it almost makes it worse.
Yeah. And or the employer's afraid of what's going to happen. They're sexist, they're racist, and they go to the newspaper, they run digital ads, they leave a negative review on Google My Business. And then it's just, we're so dramatic about this whole thing from both sides that we're never going to touch this again.
Yes. Yeah, it is. It is. And I think at the end of the day, I bring up the mindset because it does come back to hiring people that bring new ideas, new perspectives. And I think one of the challenges in hiring is, that affinity bias. Like forget race, forget gender. Affinity bias is real. We all suffer from that because even myself, I had to really check myself in hiring. You meet someone, they grew up in the same area as you. They remind you of yourself. You're having a great time during the interview. Like that's the person that you want on a team.
Yeah.
Because they make you feel good. They make you feel like you could be yourself. But the reality is, before you know it, you have all of yourself on the team, which is a problem because I'm not good at everything. I don't have a mindset to think about the world in every single viewpoint in every single way. In fact, I've gotten to a good place as a leader now where I almost hire people. I almost look for people that are different than me.
Right.
The introvert I'm drawn to now because I realize I need work done. I can't have a whole team of people that talk as much as me, right? That are like out there like socializing in this way. Some people need to be introverts and get it done in that way. And so when it comes to race and gender, I think women and people of color, we lose out sometimes when it comes to the affinity bias. Because, I've heard and I was on a recent podcast where someone said, all I care about is hiring people who want to win. All I care about is hiring people who want to win. I don't care about race, gender, blah, blah, blah. It sounded good, but what is your definition of winning? What is your definition of winning? And there could be bias in your definition of winning. Because the reality is that me and you could work on the same project, do it differently, react differently, handle stress differently, and both of us could still win.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I execute, but I execute differently than you.
Yeah. Which is a beautiful, needed thing.
It's a beautiful thing. It's common sense. My emotions look different than you. One, I use my hands all the time. But when I'm stressed or, the way that as a woman, the way that I express my emotions look different than a guy.
Yeah.
I will tell you, I've worked with some of the most emotional beings on the earth I've ever worked for or worked with have been men. Mm-hmm. They've been emotional. They've lost their cool. They've, yelled or
things
shouted.
Things go flying.
Right. But that is more of an accepted emotion. Yeah. Now, if I cry, I am doomed as a leader. Now, I cried when I delivered 2 children without drugs. That is strength. And I was crying the whole time.
Yes.
Right? So I think we have to think about diversity as more of what is our definition of winning? What is our definition of success? And are we creating an environment where everybody feels like they can contribute? Everybody's voice is heard. And because there's going to be that person who's the only one who's not going to speak up in the meetings the way they are. They're not going to feel as confident maybe because they are the only one or all eyes are on them. And I think as leaders, we have to be very deliberate, not to give that person more benefit than everybody else, but to open the doors where they feel more comfortable. And I think you almost have to be more deliberate. I've had bosses who have called on me in a meeting, in a board meeting. And it was a gift. It was a gift because I was sitting back and I wasn't as confident as a woman, the only woman in the room, the only Black person in the room. And they, by calling on me and saying, Kerri, what do you think? Gave me a gift. They didn't do that with the other people in the room, but they wanted my voice to be heard. And so I don't ask for, and I don't think women or people of color, we don't ask for more benefit. But I think if you're in the power position, and I'm just going to say as a white man, there are things that you can do from a mentorship standpoint, from a sponsorship standpoint, to really help pave the way. Like, we can't do it without you as our allies. And so if you're in a place of power, that's what I ask, you know?
You know, Kerri, you sure are wise for a person.
Thank you. Love it. Thank you.
You like that one there? For a person, like you sure are wise. Yeah. And, you know, admittedly, like I said, this conversation almost seems, it seems it's so needed. It's so necessary. But because of the environment in my brain and how I was raised, I'm like, dude, this is just common sense.
Why are we even talking about
Why
this?
does this have to be a thing, people? Why is it a thing? This is ridiculous. You know, that's not to suggest I'm not sensitive to it. And I'm, you know,
right.
But I also don't feel the need to overcompensate. You know, it's funny what you say about this too, because there's also, there's an opposite side of this. So my company, if I think about my company right now, you know, we're not one of these big juggernaut 200 person teams, but we're pretty, I would say we are half and half, half male, half female. My director of operations is a female. My director of client strategy is a female. You know, we've got writers who are female. We have artists who are female. You know,
yes. There's
no pay gap. Why is that even? I don't understand. That's okay. That's another, we could have a whole other episode about that.
Other conversation on that.
But to me, it's just, if we can get to a point in our minds, like you said, I love the mindset thing. Yeah. Can we just get to a place where we're like, okay, A, this is a thing. B, it needs to stop being a thing. C, what you just said about taking actions. Now, there is the flip side of this. I've had female employees in the past who have accused me of being an I'm trying to think of the terms. I don't hang on to things. But it was like unqualified leader, because her perception was that, see, I love collaboration. So if you sit in a leadership or an executive meeting or any type of meeting with me, I am not threatened. I do not feel threatened. I don't have an ego to dictate feeling threatened, whereby I will say, you know, what do you feel? What do you think about this? Let me know your thoughts. What are your thoughts? I've got no problem to it. So, but she took my desire for counsel, not CIL counsel, like we're sitting but SEL, counsel me.
Yes, as a weakness, as a leader.
Yes, give me your opinion. We are counselors to each other.
That's the best environment to work in.
She took that as a weak. Oh, he's an unfit leader because he can't make a decision. No, I can make a decision. Okay, I made the decision to can you.
Yes,
out you go. Fit. Off you go. We need to release you. By the way, we don't call it firing in my organization. You're released.
You're released.
you know, because for me, I've been fired.
Transitioning from you.
Yeah. Hey, look, you're released because I don't believe that you're an incapable human. I just believe that this wasn't the thing. So I'm releasing you from this obligation.
Yes, I like that.
You got to go do your deal. Go find out what if it's collecting Smurf it up, you know. But so anyway, so they take it that way, and I go, okay, well, you know, I'm sorry you feel that way. I'm sorry you feel that way. I acknowledge that that's the way you feel, but I believe there's such importance to your point about building relationships, the longevity and health of a business, its culture. If it doesn't matter what your role or position is, but just as a human, you need counsel. You want to counsel others. You want their counsel.
Yes,
It does such an interesting
great
thing.
Culture. And I mean, I want to say, like, from a diversity standpoint,
Yeah.
you know, in terms of gauging how your organization is doing, I think you need to look at your customer base, your community you live in. Listen, if you live in a community that's 99% white, I don't expect you to have, 30% minorities working there or something. So I think, we have to be reasonable that, your employee base hopefully closely matches your customer base. Right. The levels, right? When we're inspecting our organizations, what does our leadership look like versus the lowest levels of the organization and pay? But at the same time, I'm talking about the organizations. The reason why we started WOCAN is that we also have to empower the women to take control of their careers too. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to put it off like this is all on, you guys to like make the environment better. Right. I think there's also for us, the reason why I'm able to speak out about this topic is that I've made it to a certain place in my career where I'm respected, where people know that if I complain about diversity in any way, I am not making excuses. I have proven myself, in my 22-year career.
Yeah.
If I was anybody else, if I was entry level or I hadn't proven myself, somebody would be watching this and be saying, she's just making excuses for her right? Yeah. For her lack of success.
And you know what I think is so vital about this, especially in today's immediate gratification culture? What you just said, I love, because that is something that levels the playing field. DPB gang, hear me out here, okay? Yes. She proved herself.
Yes.
I proved myself.
Yes, put in the time.
You need to prove yourself, but hey, I got TikTok and I'm going to be I'm a guru and
I'm an influencer.
Shut up.
Oh, God.
Put your head down for 20 years, prove yourself, and then start talking. And
the reality is that the reason why I want to share my stories or my struggles or what I've seen in the business that I think can improve is not to knock our industry. I actually think we have the best kept secret out there in terms of a career in automotive. When I meet the Latina who is working at the drive-through at McDonald's, or I meet the Black woman who's the Uber driver, I'm constantly trying to recruit to the automotive industry because I'm like, you don't need a degree. You can come in and make six figures. You can grow, as fast as you want. Like the world is your oyster. And what is so sad is that in most of those cases, these women have never even thought about the automotive industry. Yeah. And me just bringing it up, they think it's comical. Like their vision of our business is it is not for them. And so I want to be the cheerleader in some ways that kind of pushes them to think about this, that helps them understand that our car business is a people business at the end of the day. You don't have to love cars. You probably need to like people, right? In most cases. And if you can connect with people and be relational, you can go a long ways in this business.
Speak to me about, WOCAN. I love what you just said. Like, hey, but there's also, it's not all you. There's a responsibility on us to educate our audience.
Yes.
So what are, first tell me about, because I think we have a good sense of why you started this and how fitting it is. But speak to me about some of the initiatives that you are embarking on that are going to help it educate. Because honestly, I think WOCAN, Women of Color Automotive Network, I need the Women of Color Automotive Network as much as somebody that might directly understand that they're the audience for it. You know what I mean?
Well, we have some white men. We don't have a lot, but we have a few who have joined WOCAN. But, sure. I think the first, our goal with WOCAN is to attract and support and retain more women of color in the automotive industry. Now, you might ask me, and I have been actually attacked by a few on, well, why didn't you just create a women's organization? Like, why does it have to involve race, right? Like, we're all women. We all struggle with the same things. And the reality is, one, I want to just say if women of color win, all women win. I'll just start there, right? If women of color win, all women win. And the reality is that there are some unique challenges that women of color face. One, we're the double minority, I call it, right? So we have gender, which is already hard enough in the auto business, and then race, right? We have both of those. We're 6% of the auto business, 18% of the US labor force. So we are the most underrepresented segment out there in the automotive industry.
Wow.
And the biggest difference between us and, let's say, white women is really network and generational wealth. Those are the two things. And I'm not saying all white women are rich, so I just want to be clear there.
Yeah.
And let me give you an example. There are 1,000 to 1,100 dealerships in the industry that are owned by women today. Only 70 of them are owned by women of color. Huge gap. Why? I know a lot of women who own dealerships. In most cases, their father or grandfather or great-grandfather passed that dealership down to them.
Sure.
Their husbands, their brothers, right? So being connected to a white guy has its benefits. It's why in 1920, women could vote. That wasn't all women. That was white women. My grandmother couldn't vote till the 60s.
Sure.
So I just want to point out that's not us versus them.
No, but it's also just like, look at history. History already happened. There's a reason why that generational wealth occurs, because it's how the country was founded, for crying out loud.
Yes.
You know, if like, just put yourself in, and I'm not saying you, but listener, put yourself in the frame of mind. If people from Africa founded this country, the narrative would be different.
Right.
They would have been the first ones here, the founding fathers, the ones that created everything. They would have more generational wealth predicated strictly upon the fact that they were the first ones here that established everything.
Yes.
Now, but I don't feel like a lot of people look back to history and think, well, why is it this way? That's the way it is. I can't change it as a white
You're
dude.
talking about hundreds of years ago. I'm talking about 1960.
Yeah, exactly. And we were slow moving. That's what I'm saying, is like, that's the way it started. That's why it's an issue at its most foundational level. And that's why there's generational wealth in white families in North America.
Yes.
However, we were slow to understand that there was an issue. Yeah. And now we're, 200 and some odd years into the 60s. And now we're starting to talk about it. And now we're like so fed up. The community is, you notice how I'm saying we, as if I'm part of the black community, because I'm not thinking in terms of.
I love it.
I'm not even thinking in terms of color. I'm just thinking like people, because it's not just a you issue. It's an issue.
Well, and I like to bring up my family history in that way, because people look at me and they go, oh, look at that girl raised in Silicon Valley. They don't realize my great grandfather was a slave, right? Yeah. That's only like 3 generations away from me, right? My grandmother worked in white people's homes in the Jim Crow South, and she was a maid. She was the help that you saw in the movie, right? Like, so it's not that far away. And that's not an excuse. It's just to say that there is a different experience for people of color. Yep. And there is a different, when you talk about women, there are different women and different experiences. I will say we are typically the first generation to be middle class, like me. We are the first generation to be educated. In many cases, I'm the first to get a college degree, and me and my siblings. We are the first generation as women of color to be American in many cases. Or a lot of my Latina sisters are like the first. And so when you talk about, owning a business or starting a dealership, you don't realize how much even generational knowledge is passed on to you in from your father, your uncle. And so when we started WOCAN, part of it is that we can't take a one-size-fits-all approach in attacking this. I belong to women's groups, and they are wonderful, and I am fed as a woman. But I will tell you, there are certain conversations in those groups. One, they tend to be majority white women, and there are certain conversations that don't happen. I got braids for the first time in 22 years because of COVID and the pandemic.
I saw that on Facebook, by the way.
I know. It was a big announcement. I was afraid to do it because when you Google unprofessional hair, you will see all Black women show up in the images. Google unprofessional hair. You'll see braids. You'll see every natural hairstyle that I was born, that God gifted me with as unprofessional. And so those are the kind of conversations and stigmas that you're not going to have at most women events. On the other end of the spectrum, I also belong to minority, associations and things like that, and they're wonderful. They feed me from a race standpoint, but in the auto industry, you're going to see a lot of men at those events. Yeah. So I think we're basically filling that gap, right, and being very intentional. And to answer your question on educating our members, showing them women of color who have succeeded and risen to the highest levels in auto retail, on the OEM side, on the supplier side, racing, whatever it might be, bringing our allies in who can help give us education. We're going to sign with some trainers that are going to give sales training and leadership training. And then the last thing, or second to last thing, is scholarships. We're partnering with colleges or trade schools to offer scholarships. And at the end of the day, our most immediate benefit is just networking and connection. I have met more Black and Latina service technicians than I ever thought existed on this earth. And it's because one of our founders is Patrice Banks. Yeah. She's a well-known, she owns Girls Auto Clinic. And because she's simply a founder, she has attracted every Black, Latina, Asian, Native American service technician around the world. Literally, we have 3 members that are in Africa.
Amazing.
So it's awesome.
Yeah. And I might add, my beloved DPB gang, Patrice, also an alum of the show.
Has Patrice been on? I didn't even realize that.
Ma'am. She sure has.
Awesome. Yeah, you got to have our other founders is Erica Wells. She's a sales manager in Atlanta at a dealership, franchise dealership. And the other one is Amanda Gordon, owns Gojo Auto, an independent dealer, the very first Black woman to ever get her dealer license in the year 2018.
Amazing.
Insane, if you think about it.
Might have to have all of you on at the same time.
That would be great.
That would be fun.
Yes.
I love this conversation. I feel like I could keep going. I'm not going to do that to you. You've got a company to lead, and I'm sure you've gotten 7 million text messages while we've been on here. But I'm so glad that you're able to join me and to talk about this. I hope those listening listen through the context of, you know me, through the so much love that I have for this community and for the individuals within this community. What we're witnessing here today is history, I believe, because it's, like you said, Kerri, people have reached out to you and they've kind of been like, the hater, this and that. It's so vital. Somebody has to do it today so that my children don't need to have these conversations. You know what I mean?
That's exactly it.
So I'm so delighted that we were able to talk about this. How can those listening get in touch with you to learn more about WOCAN and everything you've got going on?
Yeah, so WOCAN, we'll start there. WOCAutonetwork.com is our website. Once again, WOCautonetwork.com. Go on there. You can check out how to join and get more information on what we're doing. We're, of course, on LinkedIn, and we also have a Facebook page as well that you can follow. We really want our allies to follow us as well, so you can be looped in on all the things that we're doing. And then for me, I am mostly on LinkedIn and Facebook, so you can search for Kerri Wise and connect with me. I'd love to hear from you.
Thanks so much for joining me on the Dealer Playbook podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm Michael Cirillo, and you've been listening to the Dealer Playbook podcast. If you haven't yet, please click the subscribe button wherever you're listening right now. Leave a rating or review and share it with a colleague. If you're ready to make big changes in your life and career and want to connect with positive, nurturing automotive professionals, join my exclusive DPB Pro community on Facebook. That's where we share information, ideas, and content that isn't shared anywhere else. I can't wait to meet you there. Thanks for listening.